starters, the old wiring harness pretty much junked. As you can see, these connections were pretty much melted away, so this thing really didn't have much use. So scrapped it. Then I bought another one on eBay, still used but in much better condition. But the issue that I was having with this was some of these old like metal connection pieces. They just kind of shattered when I was putting connections through them, so I was getting a little bit disappointed with that. And then next, I do recall that in comments on one of my videos, someone posted a comment that Diamond City Cycles has this thing called a Norda wiring harness, which is a modern day reproduction of the stock harness, which I have installed on the bike right now. It was pretty awesome in that it basically was a brand new wires, all the connections are brand new, like no rust, no buildup of any like corrosion or anything like that on the connectors. And it was bendable, and you could bend it whichever shape you wanted to, and it wasn't like cracking or anything. But there were some limitations, which I'll be pointing out here. Instances where there was an issue was where the the ignition switch connects to the wiring harness. The color coding of the wires did not match up with what was in the wiring harness, and the design of the white plastic multi spade connector design did not match up with this one. So what I had to do in a bunch of places, not just this one, but this is a good example, is go in with like a little tiny screwdriver and pop out each of the individual connections. I used the old style connector from an old wiring harness, put everything back in, clipped it into place. So the wires are new, but some of the plugs are the old style. Now here's another example. So if you can see here, this kind of has that male prong. So this is coming from the wiring harness, and this is coming from the stock, like fuse box connection. So this also has a male prong, and as you can see, if you match up the wires correctly to the same spot, yep, there we go, a little interference fit there. So what I'm going to have to do is pop this off and replace it with the stock one from the existing wiring harness. So an update, I was able to remove the old connections with a really thin screwdriver like this. What I ended up doing is, once I find an example of one. Right, so this is the kind of connection that came with the existing wiring harness. So what I ended up doing is I just took the screwdriver and just kind of smashed my way like in there, releasing these guys, popping them out, and putting them in the old style connection here. And then I just used a really thin eyeglass screwdriver to kind of help force the wires in. It was sort of a tight fit, so I just used some clamps to compress everything together, but all in all, I think we're good here. The wiring setup I had for the rear of the bike. So I've got the red and black wires from the brake light going to the brown, and the green and yellow wires here in the wiring harness. And then for the turn signals, I've got those the red from each of those going to the blue and the orange. And notice that the colors are different because these are aftermarket turn signals.
and then the black and whites of the turn signals are going to ground. The black wire, I believe, corresponds to the running light functionality, so since these are rear turn signals, those are just kind of hanging out. Alright, so over here we've got all the connections from the left and right hand side switches at the handlebar coming in. I have them routed over here coming up around the ignition coil. Looks like a jumble of wires, and that's because it is. And it's just a pretty simple matter of connecting the colors all together. I did notice that there was some slight discoloration issues where it didn't match up. Like, for example, there's a light green connection here that's going for the horn. That connects to a purple wire instead of a light green. I guess the Norda wiring harness just didn't have one. Also, there's a green and red switch over here, and I believe that is for the clutch switch, I believe. So that's not being used, so that's just left free there. And then also I have a black connector here that nothing is going to it because there just really isn't anything, so that's just going to be hanging out there. Alright, so here we have our wiring set up for the ignition system. So we've got the ignition coils mounted here. Obviously, the ignition, the spark plug cable kind of going over here to the spark plugs. So we have a black and white connection and a blue connection over here. So the blue is connecting to the blue of the points contact cable. And the black and white is going, oh yeah, sorry, and then it's also connecting to the condenser, which is on the other side. And then the black and white cable is going to the black and white of the ignition, or of the wiring harness. The wiring harness also has a a green connection, which is connecting over here to the frame. And we've got the same thing going on the other side for the right side ignition coil. Alright, here's the wiring for the front stop switch for the front brake. There's supposed to be a green and yellow connection and a black connection, but I didn't have a black connection in this style, so I just used a brown one that I found on an old wiring harness. So an additional item of note that I wanted to point out was on my bike I've eliminated the old regulator and rectifier and replaced it with a modern combo. So the wires in the harness match up to the new item over here, which is actually mounted, too bad the air filter's in the way, it's mounted underneath the battery box, and it did have a black connection that I believe on Common Motor Collective they recommended routing it to one of the black connections elsewhere on the wiring harness. So I don't know if you could see here, but I've got a black wire coming up through here and connecting over to this multi-black connection. Now the existing wire wasn't long enough to reach, so I just spliced two wires together and made an extra long extension there. This is the one part that I absolutely hate working on because it's just like a jumble of wires that goes in here. So we've got the wiring harness, the front part coming in through this hole over here. We've got the lights for the instruments coming in, the turn signals, and the, I think they call them idiot lights or whatever. That's all coming in through here. So all these connections kind of have to happen over here, as well as the headlight itself. And those wires are all connected here. So made sure everything is kind of nice and tight. And I'm not exactly sure what the correct way to mount everything is, but I just kind of put it in a somewhat organized fashion and then just smash it together to put the headlight in. So we'll go ahead and do that here. So once again, it's pretty much just a matter of matching up the colors. The wiring harness did have an exorbitant amount of these green, like round connections. I only used a couple of them. So we'll go ahead and get everything mounted. Now, to put the headlight back in, there's a tab on it here that matches up with this tab over here. So I'll go ahead and do this carefully but forcefully. There we go. And there's our headlight. Gotta just now buy a couple of things. So I want to buy a new horn for the bike to be installed there, and I'm gonna get a new sealed battery. So this is the one that I had before. It was just one that I got at Batteries Plus. It was one that you need to put acid in, you know, top it off with ionized water and all that. And as you can see here, it was burned. So it looks pretty crispy. There's still some fire extinguisher particles on here. And it was leaking acid because the breather hose got out, so it got rid of a lot of the paint that I had on the bike to begin with. So I'm gonna go with the sealed one. I think I'm gonna go with the Moto Bat version. And then I guess the next phase is gonna be hooking it up and checking out all the lights and switches and electrical connections, making sure everything is wired properly and is functioning in the right way. So yeah, we'll continue there. Good news, the mailman came by today and dropped off some goodies for my bike over here. So the first thing that I got was a Hella motorcycle horn, just a cheap $12 one that I got on Amazon from their website. And then I also got the Moto Bat MB12U AGN battery. So with those items combined, we can just throw them on the bike, and hopefully all the electrics should be sorted, and we can go ahead and try everything out. Pop this sucker in here. That's a pretty good fit. So one thing that's kind of cool about this battery is it's very modular. As you can see, there's positive terminals on both sides here, negative terminals on both sides, so you can flip the battery any way you want. And you can connect it from the sides or at the top, depending on how your wires are set up. Uh-oh. So as you can see, the main fuse here popped, so I'm gonna have to check out a couple items here, make sure all my wiring's correct, everything is grounded. I'm gonna check the wiring on this flash relay, and we'll see if we can fix it. So another suggestion that I've read online about addressing the main fuse popping is grounding of the handlebar switches. So I don't know if you can see here, but within the riser mounts over here, there's rubber, I guess, vibration dampeners that effectively isolate these switches in the handlebars from grounding through the metal. So I know on some other bikes, or maybe even the CB360, I don't know because mine didn't have it, there's a jumper cable that connects over here through the riser mount, I guess like bolt, and this nut that connects to part of the frame. So what I did just to be safe is I took a little jumper cable and I connected it down here and routed it to ground in the wiring harness in the headlight bucket area. So yeah, hopefully that can help out as well. Now, when I posted a question about the wiring and the main fuse popping, a lot of people said check the flasher relay, because if that's wired improperly, that might cause the main fuse to pop. It seems kind of silly in terms of like such a small component like this can cause the main fuse to pop, but whatever. So I did take a look here and I compared it to the wiring diagram, and there's only 2 prongs over here on this flasher relay, and there are 3 wires in the wiring harness. And I did see that the green one on the wiring harness just kind of hangs out, doesn't really do anything. So let's pop this off. Alright, and then we've got this gray one here, which needs to be probably connected to this other prong. Alright, and then we'll replace this main fuse with the new one. Alright, here's a new 15 amp fuse. Okay, and I'll try hitting the switch again. Good enough for now. Nice. Alright, so I'm going to turn off the light and turn on the main switch. Nice. Yep, looks like nothing popped. All of these are okay. Cool. Now I'm going to do a functional test of the headlight, high beam, turn signals, or in the front. Right, high beam. Turn signals. Still working in the back too. Then I'm going to try the horns. Okay, so I'm going to try to check the back now too. So at the back end, we'll try the tail light, turn signals. I'll do the front and the rear brake, make sure they're all lined up. Rear brake. Now we'll do front brake. Cool. So there was a little bit of a hiccup with the wiring, but looks like that was all sorted out. So tested to make sure all the electrical items on the bike work. So we're in good shape there. So the next thing that I really need to do with the bike is get the fuel system mounted up, set the timing with the points, and then fingers crossed, wait for warmer weather and go ahead and try to start up for the first time and maybe get into some tuning. But project's progressing pretty well, and I'm really happy with the progress I've made so far.